I'm Yael Shapira, OLAM's Director of Network Engagement and Programs, and I'm excited to delve into another ethical practices topic as part of OLAM's Aspire program. I'm going to give a brief introduction to the Aspire program and apologies to those of you who have heard the spiel a number of times before. Next slide. What is Aspire? OLAM's Aspire is a multi-year program that aims to help our 60+ partner organizations improve ethical practices in their international development, humanitarian, and global service work. OLAM wants to ensure that Jewish and Israeli organizations follow international standards and are regarded as highly qualified leaders in the field. Since there are so many ethical issues to tackle, we've decided to focus on 4 general topics in our pilot year: ethical communications, community engagement, monitoring and evaluation of projects, and global service or volunteering. Next slide. So what does this actually mean? Throughout the year, OLAM offers resources and tools that will support our partners in deepening your ethical practices. These resources include a self-assessment survey that will allow you to assess your work in the 4 topics and get a score that places you on an ethical spectrum. It's a great way to evaluate where you excel in your ethical work and where you can be doing better. We've developed, together with experts, an ethical practices spectrum for each of the topics, which outlines 10 commandments or 10 guidelines on ethical behavior and what it might look like to be on a spectrum of just beginning in the process to being a leader. These spectrums are the basis of Aspire and will be guiding our programming. We have resource lists with links to dozens of existing videos, blogs, guides, papers, and more that were created by organizations and professionals from around the world. We are definitely not here to reinvent the wheel. There's so much great resources out there. We'll be offering workshops and sessions each month, such as today's workshop. There will be a space to learn from experts, from each other, and share your own lessons and good work. Each session will delve into 1 or more of the ethical 10 commandments. And very shortly, we will be launching Aspire micro grants to help fund your initiatives and activities that promote ethical practices in your organization. Next slide. All this information and more can be found on the OLAM website. When you go to the Aspire page, you will see links to ethical spectrums, to resources lists, and a calendar of upcoming events. Check out the link that Amy will put in the chat. Next slide. Before I shift into today's topic, I wanted to let you know about our next Aspire webinar that will focus on informed consent, how to ensure you're collecting information and images from your partners in the most ethical way. So save the date and keep your eyes out for more information. And now on to today's workshop. It falls under the topic of ethical global service, though it's relevant to all organizations that send people to developing countries, whether it's volunteers, professional staff, or students. The 9th of the 10 commandments of ethical global service is to mitigate negative environmental impact. We believe that in order for an organization to carry out its work ethically, it must consider the environmental impact and take actions to recognize and minimize potential harm. We know from experience that climate change is disproportionately affecting poor people in developing countries. It's impossible today to run any program without it affecting the local environment, and therefore it's critical to consider the environment in all parts of the project cycle: volunteer trainings, logistics, communications, and more. As you see, we've defined a leading organization as one that has a written environmental policy, that uses local resources, and that thinks about carbon offsetting in their work. Next slide. We're going to start off with hearing 2 different perspectives about addressing environmental impact. Our first speaker, Aldrin Kalitz, will share his experience from disaster relief missions in Haiti and will offer suggestions on how organizations can minimize harm in humanitarian settings. And Brandon Blash-Cohen will discuss the steps his global service organization has taken to address their own harm, and will offer examples that your organizations can take as well. We'll start with Aldrin, who is joining us from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. He's an agronomist who specializes in natural resource management and is also the executive secretary of the organization Haiti Survie, or Haiti Survive, an organization which ties broad awareness raising with citizen action. Haiti Survie believes that the struggle to defend the environment should be an active part of the life of every human being. Haiti Survie also works in partnership with OLAM's partner organization, World Jewish Relief. So please take note of your questions throughout the presentation, and there will be time for Q&A in the end. And after the two speakers in the Q&A, we will have some time to hear from you and to do some workshopping about how this work relates to your own organization. So with that, I will pass it along to Aldrin. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi. Thanks for inviting me to this important session where we talk together, where we share our experiences on the humanitarian activity or cooperation from north to south, or from south to south too, también also. It's a really good pleasure for me to be here to share my experience with everyone. Unfortunately, my first language is I'm French-speaking people, but my English is not really good, probably sometimes pronunciation. And I will do my best to explain my experiences with others. And any question you have, I will be available for that. Thanks. Can you share the presentation with for me, please? Yeah, I am working with an organization named IT Survie. IT Survie is an organization created in 2003. At the beginning, our main activity is a strong goal to protect our environment. As you know, probably if you get some information about Haiti, situation, environmental situation is really, it's a little bit really difficult. And the reason I said we work to protect our environment. For my presentation today, I want to give a brief presentation of my organization and talk about the natural disaster in Haiti, particularly the response of the activities in 2010, and to see what are the impact of the responses on economy of the country, on environmental situation. And also at the end, I want to talk about how to reduce the negative impact. I will bring some recommendation on these issues. Next, please. Do you hear me? Next. Yes. First of all, I want to thank everyone for your support you provide, not only in Haiti, but all over the world, to support, to help community affected by disaster. I imagine now in the world, we have a lot of disaster in Asia, in Latin American, and in the Caribbean region. And sometimes it's really difficult to, we have faced a dilemma on how we can make some activity like to address the need of people. And also you have to say, if it is possible, like to do your best for your activity, get less impact. Sometimes it's a really big question. Do more and probably do more and or do less but better. That's a really big question. And that the reason now I want to address the situation of disaster in Haiti. Next, please. Every year, Haiti faces in a crisis situation caused by disaster. I don't want talk about all disaster, natural disaster. Like example, every year we got a flood. every year we got drought, we got a hurricane, and unfortunately in 2010 we got a big earthquake, and recently last August we got another big earthquake, but it was in the south part of the country, and is all disaster affected have a really big impact on the situation. Like example, you can in 2015, you remember about Hurricane Matthew, who devastated the south area of the country. And after each disaster, we got a lot of international assistance all over the world. I remember many agencies arrived and tried to implement some responses. But sometimes those responses get a negative impact on, as I had mentioned before, on environmental issues, on economical issues. Let's see, let me share some experiences on the negative impact of the responses. Next, please. In 2010, when we got a big earthquake in Haiti, we have a lot of foreign supporters who came to give the support to affected people, because it was a really big disaster. More than around 300,000 people died, but it was a really one of the big disaster in the world. But when we take also in consideration the situation of Haiti as a vulnerable country, and but at the beginning, when a lot of responses arrive, and first of all, we don't have, as a small country, people who arrive don't get any information from the culture and the language of. For me, it's a first problem. Many people arrive, but they don't know nothing about the language, or like we will get some problem to communicate to the affected people. And also, the country was a small country, and many areas was affected in Port-au-Prince, but we have a limited capacity to address some problem. And at the moment, we have another problem who arrive is a competition, like to access to the services. Like example, people who get more resources can get access to the resources. Like example, during the 2010 earthquake, we saw that rental price of the houses increased a lot, and after that, the price still higher, and you can imagine like the impact on the poor people. They can get access like to rent an houses, and also people who get the small budget. I think it's a problem. And the other problem we identify as economical issues is about the labor. Like example, during the earthquake, most organizations make some activities, and the price of labor increase. Like example, when you get people working in the construction issues, like when the price increase, at the end, after the activities, like they create a bad situation. They got a bad impact on the the situation of the country, like day by day. Now, to request the labor, you have to pay more than before. And at the moment, create an impact on environmental, on economical situation. Next, please. And in terms of environmental issues, like many people have needs, and to bring the needs, we got a big problem of packaging, like food or non-food item. A lot of packaging arriving, and who constitute for me a waste. But and in any activities like responses activities, we taking this aspect in consideration. How we manage the waste, or we just dump them in dumping place and leave those aspects. And also in the camp, like many people arrive, they don't have any study like to determine the risk of immediate risk in the environmental issues. Like example, in the camp, how about the resources, natural resources? And for a lot of people, I think if the presence of those people affect the resources, the water consumption, energy also, like example, many people use energy like generator, like when people arrive. Haiti is a hot area, and people want to live in the cold area, but electricity is not is really bad, and at this moment they use a lot of generator. Probably one is noise pollution, the other one is CO2 emission. And they don't, I think they're supposed to address those issues. And about the transport of the goods. Like example, when you bring the goods, like the products, a lot of transport. And also you create a noise pollution in the area where people don't have. Like example, in rural area, you got a big truck and arrive, they create a lot of noise in the morning or in the afternoon, and also probably risk of accident, where because people don't have possibility like to day by day to get a lot of car in the area. And
Aldrin, I'll just say you've Aldrin, 1 more minute, please.
1 more.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks. And I want to, unfortunately, I want to let me explain about the. I think we have to reduce the impact. I have some recommendations. Like example, first is about choice. We have to, when we're making responses, like it's important, like to identify people who get a little experiences on humanitarian issues, and also develop some strong partnership with local organizations. We can work together on these issues, because local organizations local people have about the culture and also about the language. It will facilitate the communication with people affected. And also, we have to avoid some disturbing regarding the economical issues, as I mentioned before, because to not disturb the normal order of the things in the country. And also establish some responses program on mitigation plan for accident, for pollution, waste, and also excessive consumption or waste management. At the end, I want to say, like, let's work together we can do better, probably do less, but we can do it better. And you have to play a really good role on the situation. And I do my best, and I will be available, like to give more detail during the question point. And I'm really happy, like, to be here to share experiences, and I will be available. Or if you want more information, you can do it through email. And do not remember, you do a really good job. And let's continue working, like, to support people who have a lot of needs all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aldrin. That was a really interesting perspective and some really great practical tips. We will send a follow-up email with Aldrin's PowerPoint so you could see everything he wrote, and also he kindly offered his email if you have follow-up questions. Thank you so much. So now we're going to move on to Brandon. So if someone just make sure you're on mute, please. There we go. Okay. So Brandon Blash-Cohen is the Executive Director of Amijade. Brandon has nearly 20 years of experience in the nonprofit, service learning, and international education sectors. In his role at the organization, Brandon has organized over 700 global service learning programs, overseeing life-changing global experiences for around 11,000 students, and spearheading sector-changing innovations like the Global Switchboard and the concept of fair trade learning. Brandon kindly sat on our steering committee to develop our ethical spectrum for global service, and we're thrilled to have him back to share his expertise. On to you, Brandon.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Aldrin, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to go rogue here for a moment and not show my slide deck yet. And thanks for that really nice introduction. What it doesn't say, and what it never says, is that I'm actually also a film school dropout. And I went to college initially to study film. And as I was hearing Aldrin speak, I was reminded that oftentimes, like the only thing I learned in film school for the few weeks that I was there was that, film's like a reflection of what we think as a people and how we're experiencing the world. And for many, many years, I mean, I can't even think of a movie prior to like 2006 that whenever there was an external or major threat going on, that, whether it was aliens invading in a movie or an asteroid coming, the world usually unified around it. And that's not where we're at right now, right? If anyone saw the movie Don't Look Up, that's a reflection of who we are and what's going on right now. And this conversation around environment and how we do better in whether it's international development or global service or volunteerism, or whether it's cooking or whatever sector you're in, nowadays it really should be that every single person, no matter what they're doing, a best practice is to try to be better environmental stewards. I mean, there's a threat here that we all need to be joining, and yet it's not, and it's not at the forefront of a lot of our conversations for all sorts of reasons. So, many thanks to OLAM for including this as a best practice. And I do think that with a lot of organizations like ours, this is where it starts. That it starts with us, and then hopefully everyone else in all their sectors ends up engaging this as a major part of what they do. So the other thing I want to say is, like, I don't have any answers for this stuff, but I do have some stories and some observations from our work, and that's what I'm going to present today. And let me pull up my slide deck, and of course we tested it, and this happens every time when you test something, it then disappears. 1 second. I'm going to try to share my desktop, I guess. This is weird. And you see my email. My calendar. There we go. All right, so, I pressed the wrong button. This always happens. There we go. All right, so just a quick little background here. You know, what is our role in mitigating damage on host communities when sending staff, volunteers, and students abroad? Despite what movies are telling us now, everybody's role is significant and vital no matter what we're doing. I don't think anyone would be on this call if that wasn't the case. So, you know, if there's any resistors to this answer, then, you know, raise your hand now, we can chat about it instead of me going on for the next 5 minutes. But I think that we're all in agreement that we have a role here. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give a quick introduction to our work, share some considerations, and then consider what we can do better in the future. So I run this organization. Amizade, for those of you who speak Portuguese, is the Portuguese word for friendship. And we were founded in the Amazon. This is an area with a long history of outsiders damaging the environment 27 years ago. Initially, we were a volunteer vacations organizations, and then we evolved into this global service learning organization. Today, we collaborate with all sorts of different organizations around the world to bring volunteers into different communities. We are small, but we have a lot of operations, and this means a lot of movement and a lot of potential harm. And my hunch is that if you're on this call, you might be small also, but you probably are also a part of some of these challenges. So over the last 27 years, we've had over 27,000 participants, and most of these people are getting on airplanes. It's a huge carbon footprint, actually, for the size of our organization. Every year, we have all sorts of partners. We have universities that we're working with, high schools that we're working with. Some of them care about these issues. Some of them actually don't care at all. Some of them are just trying to provide a service or tick a box or make numbers reach a certain level in terms of volunteer hours or something like this. We work with government agencies. Oh my gosh, sometimes governments care about this, sometimes they don't. It depends on who's in power. We work with community groups, corporations, neighborhoods, and all sorts of others. And just to be clear, nearly every single thing we do as an organization both engages conversations around climate change and perpetuates it. It's unavoidable. And so what I want to share with you just is that there's a wide spectrum here of organizations that do similar work to us. Some, again, don't care, some do care, some it's a marketing ploy, some it's not. Our job is to try to push the conversation into a more ethical place, into a place where we're all contributing a little bit more. So one of the things that we did as an organization was help to create this concept of fair trade learning. No one was policing us. No one was telling us, for example, you shouldn't use single-use items. And so we decided to help to create this, these tenets, and they included reciprocity, transparency, and equity and justice. As a part of equity and justice, we think we need to be better environmental stewards. And we created one indicator, this is 11 years ago, that we wanted to measure ourselves by. And that had to do with, are we locally sourcing materials when we're doing volunteer projects? And what are the environmental impacts? And to be quite frank, OLAM's measurement is a little bit clearer, a little bit better, and very helpful. So as we started off with, I strongly recommend everyone look at that. But when we first created this indicator, we were entry level across the board everywhere in the world. That means that we weren't even having conversations about it. Today, I'm happy to report that we're nowhere near the ideal, but we're moving forward. So here's where we're really messing up. There's too many flights. There's just too many flights in our sector, and it's something that we don't have a good answer for. And sometimes these are flights that are really far away for a very short period of time. What have we done to think about this? Well, we tried to do carbon offsets years ago. If you're unfamiliar with this, it's basically just paying someone who does something to try to offset your airplane ticket or your bus ticket or something like this. We've never actually had one person buy one. That's probably out of 15,000 people who had the opportunity. We tried to stay away from purity, and that is that being really rigid about it, being like, we're never getting on an airplane again. That's not realistic. And if you want to know a little bit more about this, I recommend you listen to This American Life's The End of the World as We Know It. Really interesting. We talked a lot, but we did nothing. And let's be really honest, it's really easy to have this conversation today. It's really hard to then make a decision tomorrow about it. And then, of course, the world helped us with our dilemma around too many flights. It shut down, and not until tomorrow is my first travel work trip in the last 2 years. So We basically created only virtual programs which had no carbon footprint. We have way too many single-use items when we are traveling. And it's even worse now with COVID. Everything from utensil, like eating utensils to gloves to now, masks are everywhere. It's a real issue. Our communities are not happy about it. But what are we going to do? Well, first of all, we started a conversation. Again, bare minimum, but it's better than a lot of people are doing right now. Again, trying to stay away from purity. We need to wear masks. We need to, we need to have a way to eat food without, too much of an issue. We began tracking. This is super important. And maybe if there's anything I can share that's of help, if you're not tracking this sort of thing, start tracking it. And then we actually did redirect some funds. Very little, but it was a help. And then again, the world shut down. So we didn't have anyone or anywhere to mess with the environment. And then the last thing I'm going to share here is that we've got a real paradox with money and convenience. They always seem to win. And we're getting into a cycle of just getting by seems to hurt the environment with our communities and within our own communities. And what I mean by this is we're not always very sincere about how just convenient things are that hurt the environment that we have control over. I'm flying tomorrow to Washington, D.C. It's a 3-hour, 42-minute drive from my house. That seems ridiculous. I could get on a bus. I could do all sorts of stuff, but I got kids. I got to get to school. I got all this other stuff going on. And it's really hard to make a constitution that impacts people's lives that way. And so our organization is battling with this. What's our constitution on this? Where do we draw the line? Where do we set an example for others? Again, this purity thing, you got to listen to this episode of This American Life if you haven't. We can't, I might not work for this organization if it was such that I couldn't get in time to see my daughter's piano lesson, so it's very difficult to set super rigid standards, but we have to start somewhere. We also need to reconsider what satisfaction is. This is complicated because if someone is not satisfied, they might be resistant to change. They might be upset. They might be less likely to do something or make a change in their life. And so if they're less comfortable, they might be less satisfied. And we see this with our volunteers all the time. We need to find a balance where people can feel comfortable without hurting the community that they're serving, whether they're from that community or not. And the last thing I'll mention on this is that the pandemic has made people more desperate and pollution easier to accept. A lot of the communities we work in need to say yes in a way that they previously hadn't. They need money, they need jobs. And, here in Western Pennsylvania, where I'm based, for many years when fracking took over, what we heard on the radio, what we saw on TV was fracking brings jobs. Forget about the environmental concerns, forget about all these other things, fracking brings jobs. And our partners around the world are more vulnerable than they have been in many, many years. And so whatever that job might be that's coming, we might be able to turn a blind eye to other things. We looked in the mirror through something called Liberating Structures. It's just a reflection activity. You can go to liberatingstructures.org. It's not a very nice website, but it's a lot of good activities. And for the last 5 years, we've asked ourselves tough questions. And the toughest question that keeps popping up is the same one. And that has to do with our environmental impact. How is it that we can be stewards for joy and justice in the world when we put so much carbon into the environment, when we're putting people on airplanes, when we're putting, in sort of like this endless zone? So we started imagining what a social justice offset credit could look like. And by this, I mean just a series of questions. Is it okay to hurt the environment while teaching about it? Is a brief environmental expense worth it if it creates a generation of folks who manage it better, right? So if every participant in every program we have, whether they're a community member or a visitor, if they're going to lead their life in a better, more environmentally friendly way, is it worth it to put them on an airplane to do that? And is this even like a measurable consideration, or is this me just trying to justify, how much damage we're doing to the environment? So there are great things that we're doing practically on the ground. We're contributing to reforestation in Puerto Rico. We're assisting with climate change information sharing everywhere we work. And we're actively working on improving the biodiversity pretty much in every community we partner in. I mean, this matters, right? Or does it not? And so that's what we're battling with as an organization, trying to figure out what our constitution is, where we draw the line in saying, hey, we can't be super rigid. We can't stop travel. We have to do something. We have to, eat off paper plates sometimes, especially in the COVID era. But what can we do? So we are bringing together a task force of board members and expert partners to advise on, is it even possible for us to be a carbon neutral organization given our mission within 10 years? What are our approaches to water and air pollution mitigation in programming? Are there suggestions? Is it possible for us to end single-use items? We can't send everyone on abroad with a cutlery set, for example. Is there something to this new offset consideration idea that we have? Like, is there a moral, or maybe we need to bring in a philosopher onto this board member imperative that we have, that we can do this work, we can contribute negative impacts to the environment, but we can do so only if certain educational outcomes are met. So our goal is to submit a report and suggestions as part of our strategic plan by the end of the year. In all, though, I just want to share that this is something that we should all be doing in all aspects of our lives. There's nothing controversial about it. Passing the buck to my kids and grandkids is not gonna cut it. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much for OLAM for organizing this. And if nothing else, let's keep this at the forefront of all of our conversations in the future.
Thank you so much, Brandon. As you said at the beginning, this is really a starting point. I'm sure a lot of you have already thought of these issues, but this is not the end all. We hope that you will go back to your teams, potentially put together a steering committee or a board, and a few people who will look into this topic really deeply and think about how you can make some changes. So we're going to have just a few questions or a few minutes for Q&A. You're welcome to just unmute yourself and ask any questions, and then we will move on to more of a workshop activity.
Hi, Brandon. I have a question for you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Aldrin, as well. I'm particularly interested, Brandon, in what you said about, is it worth it to have a small environmental expense if you have a generation trained on how to better manage it? So I was wondering, now that it's been many, many years since you've been doing this, what kind of short-term things are you looking at right after a program among the participants who just did it? Like, do you track them a little bit? Do you find out what they've done after? Like, what types of things are you looking at?
That's a great question. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so we have a whole post-program survey, and we focus the survey on behavior changes. And what I'm going to say, it might sound a little weird if you're an academic, but what we call attributed behavior changes or intentional behavior changes. That means that we're looking to see if a volunteer is saying to us, I attribute the fact that I'm doing X, Y, and Z because of this experience, or we're looking to see if they're saying, I intend to live differently as a result of this experience. It's really hard to go 10 years down in the future and say, unequivocally, they live this way because of this 2-week experience or whatever 10 years prior. But some of the things include empathy. Are they feeling empathy for folks that they served with? 2, we're looking at networks. Do they have a bigger network, a broader network, a more diverse network? So if a hurricane hits their community, are they going to be protected from someone distant, or someone else going to check in on them? Or the community that they were in, are they going to be more aligned in that community as well? And then 3, we're looking at civic engagement. Are they more likely to volunteer in their community, get out, be participants, vote even if they live in a democracy? We're also looking at small things like career goal clarification. Do they feel more zeroed in or zoned in on what they might do? And then lastly, we're also looking at just general behavior changes. Like, are they more likely to in their home life for example, reimagine how they impact climate change? For the vast majority of folks that we're working with, we're seeing, especially in terms of like conscious consumption, that is how they spend money, really high shifts. And we've seen that for decades actually in this type of work. Other things, less and less, right? So career goal clarification in more recent years has been more limited. And also we tend to work with younger people and the new generation, Gen Zers. We haven't quite figured out yet in like real human life what makes them tick. The metaverse, maybe like there's more clear things how to get them to behaviorally do things, but not in like real life.
Thanks, Brandon. We have a question from Richard in the chat. And I think I'll start with Aldrin and then Brandon, if you have something to add. How do you consider your donors and your competitors in this behavior about lessening or minimizing environmental impact? He says that for his organization, it is a big challenge as the staff feel pretty lonely on these topics. So Aldrin, do you talk to your donors or other partners or organizations around about these issues?
Yes. For us, when we, first of all, we discuss with donors or I don't say competitor, because we have the same objective. Our objective is help people in really in vulnerable situation. And from that, we have, how we can say that, we have a space like in coordination issues, we have a network where we discuss on the situation and to aware people about to decrease a little bit the impact. And also we create some policy at internal level. Like example, in Haiti survey, we have some policy regarding to decrease the impact, and also we try to create some alternative. As example, I can give on waste issues. We have a lot of packaging when we bring food or non-food item, and the package, what we said, we can use them like to put the products we give to the beneficiary. And at this moment, we decrease a little bit the waste, and people can use them after, like to go to the marketplace, like to when they buy something. And we use all issues as a package, like to manage the possible waste we can get after the activities. And also they can use those issues as they use them to create other products. That I think it's really important. And also at coordination level, like when we get the meeting, we try to aware all people, like to get more best practices, and we share practices like to decrease a little bit the impact. And also we work on localization of the fund, like example, like where local organization can play a big role on the humanitarian activities.
Thank you, Aldrin. I think the key part of that is coordination and bringing people together who may share your ideas and not see it as competitors. Brandon, you have a quick response to that before we move on?
Yeah, I would just say that the big tension point here is marketing versus reality. And that's, you know, on how the staff is feeling pretty lonely on some of these topics. I get it, you know, like so much of it seems to be hullabaloo. Like, it's like, you know, every corporate social responsibility team in the world has some sort of environmental package, but so much of it seems cheapened because it's more marketed than actualized. And I feel that within our own policy, as we're trying to create this environmental constitution for the organization, it's like some of it seems helpful, maybe, but a lot of it also seems like it's just going to end up being something that has a pretty page on our website, and that's demoralizing.
And on that note, we're going to move ahead, and unfortunately isn't time for more Q&A. But thank you, Aldrin, thank you, Brandon, for your perspectives. I'm sure this will raise a lot of questions, and maybe we'll do a round 2 of this and, you know, get more deep into 1 or 2 of the aspects. Thank you both so much for joining us. You're welcome to hang around for a few minutes longer. And I'm sure we'll be in touch again about these issues. So I just want to very quickly share with you some resources that I'm going to send as a follow-up email, but just to let you know that you don't have to start from scratch here. There's plenty of work that has already been done, and some great kind of guidelines on next steps. So this is what I'm going to be sending. We have thus far 5 resources, but if you have any that you know of, please send it to me. I'd love to add to this list. So we have here an article that has very specific actions that you can take in order to be more resilient to climate change. There's a really practical guide aimed at understanding where in your organization and project cycle you should be thinking about environmental practices. There's a study abroad program for any of you who are sending volunteers or students abroad. This study abroad program has made commitments and has a policy around reaching carbon neutrality. There's an online course if you're interested in understanding the humanitarian, the environmental impact in humanitarian action. And then the UN OCHA has a tool for tracking your expected impact and then understanding how you can prevent negative impacts. I just want to show you from what I've seen here, the Handicap International guide is actually really, really great and useful and practical. It offers many different aspects and specific questions to ask. But I just want to show you this one photo here, one thing that they offer, which is throughout your cycle, what are some steps you need to take when planning a program and working with partner organizations. So really from the needs assessment stage, you should be talking to your local partners and understanding what are environmental impacts that they have and how is climate change affecting them. Even if you are working on topics such as education or, you know, health or agriculture, things that may not always seem relevant, it's really important to have this baseline understanding from the beginning. And then you move into planning, you integrate environment into your objectives, activities, indicators, etc. When you launch the program, include environment in your evaluation, in your program, and then make sure to include it in your implementation. And when you close your program, when you leave, your staff, your volunteers, your students, make sure that you ensure make sure that no waste remains behind. So just wanted to put a little shout out for these resources, and I hope you're all able to benefit from them.